Are you interested in making a journal? Then you are in the right place. In this video, I'll share my process from start to finish, how to make a journal by hand. Let's begin with the patchwork cover. I used a scissors, PVA glue, a bone folder, you could also use a knife, and a cardboard box. You'll also need some scraps of fabric. Take the cardboard box and disassemble it. That box has the front and back covers and the spine built right in. I'm using a piece of scrap paper to build my patchwork cover, placing the fabrics all around until I have the layout that interests me. Once that's done, I stitch that to the cover itself. I took that patchwork cover and I glued it directly to the cardboard that had been cut out in the shape of my book cover. Once that was in place, I used a pencil and a ruler to mark off a 45-degree angle off each of the corners, about 1/4 of an inch from the tip of each corner. And I snipped those off with the scissors. I use my bone folder to score the inside of the spine. And then I started at one of the short ends. Added some glue. I like to do the 2 short ends first and then the 2 long sides. Now for the long sides. In each of the corners, I use the tip of my bone folder, but you also could use your fingernail, something that you can press in the edge, just like that. Tucks in the edge so that when you fold over the long edge, you'll have a nice, neat corner. I lightly tapped the corners with my bone folder to square them off, and then repeated the process on the other side. Before I put the end papers, I want to let it dry completely. I'm using some scrapbook paper as the end pages for the front and back covers. Cut those about a 1/4 inch smaller than both the front and back. Glue on the end papers. Centered from the top and bottom, equidistant from the edge of the book cover as well, and smoothed it out with the bone folder. Repeat it on the other side. And now I need to put something along the spine of the book. I'm using a bit of fabric rather than paper. The spine of the book will get folded in and out over time, and the fabric just has a little bit of give, whereas the paper does not. Start at one edge and work my way down, smoothing the fabric with my hand. Once that was all glued down, I let it dry overnight. Now let's talk about the papers. You'll see this yellow paper a lot. That's my template. Take a piece of paper or something that's going to be the size that you need for each of your papers inside the book, and have that handy so that when you're cutting down papers to go inside your book, you have a piece that's already measured to the shape that you need. That way you can trim the papers to suit you. You'll see here, I'm using it to measure the paper before I use my paper cutter. I also used a metal ruler to tear some pages as well. That template is really handy to make sure that pages that go outside the dimensions of my book. These are two books that I'm making for my daughters. They're very similar in design. I wanted them to have similar papers inside of each, so I made two piles of papers, one for each of the books. Here I have all the papers ready to be made into signatures. I started by sorting my papers. I have scrapbook paper, small and large sizes, miscellaneous office papers, graphic papers that I painted myself, as well as textured papers, copy paper, and a whole bunch of papers that I made with pockets built in. If you're interested in seeing how I made these pages, you can look in the description below and I'll have links to all those videos. These books have 7 signatures and each of the signatures has 7 pages. Once I had a signature ready to go, I centered the papers how I wanted them. And I stitched down along the spine using my sewing machine. This is what that first signature looks like. I did this for the remaining 6 signatures. Here you can see how I'm using my sewing machine to just stitch down from top to bottom. I am going to hand sew these books, but by sewing each of the signatures in place with my sewing machine, it really made the process go quite smoothly when I stitched together the books. When each of the signatures were sewn, I used my bone folder to crease along the edges one last time. And right before I started to stitch the book, I realized it was a good time to sew some tabs. I pulled out a variety of fabrics, little bits of paper, When I had a nice assortment, I got out my 2 stacks of signatures, took them to my sewing machine, and I sewed the tabs into each. Here's a closer look at all the tabs inside the signatures. There's a nice variety of placement as well as textures. They'll be really interactive as the books are used over time. If this is going too fast for you, please feel free to slow down the playback speed so you can have a closer look. I fit each of the signatures inside the book just to see how it would look. Now let's go on to the binding. This is where it all comes together. Again, I made a template. A template is so helpful when creating handmade books because if you make one template, you can use it over and over and over, and you know that the holes will be where you want them to be every single time, that they will be consistent. I clipped the template inside the book and I used my awl to make all the holes. There's 7 holes across the center, 7 holes across the top, and 7 holes across the bottom. I'm going to hand stitch each of these signatures into the books. But before I can do that, I need to make the holes in each of the signatures. So how do I know where to put them? I use the template, of course. I lined up the template and went straight through the line of stitches in the center, bottom, and top of each of the 7 signatures. It's not a quick process to make books like this, but they're so lovely and so much fun to work with. It's definitely worth the effort. I'm using some waxed linen twine. Measure 1, 2, 3 times the height of the signature. Thread it through the needle. This is a large-eyed embroidery needle. In from the center, out the signature. I left a couple inches tail, and then I went through the very first center hole in the spine of the book. I found the center of this signature and I clipped it to the front of the book. I looked at the outside of the spine and I went inside from the top all the way down to the bottom, back out through the signature and out through the spine again, making sure that I'm in the correct line of holes. Back through the center on either side of that thread that's running from top to bottom, and just tied it off in a knot. Now it's time for the second signature. Starting in the center of the signature, out the middle hole, through the second center hole in the spine, leaving a couple inches tail in the center, down to the bottom. For me, it doesn't matter if I start at the bottom or the top, as long as I initially start in the center and go to one end, back up to the other end, inside the book, back out through the spine, pull it tight, and then back in through the center. It's going to hold these signatures very securely in the book. But I like the extra security of having machine stitched each of the signatures together. I find that they will maintain their integrity over time by doing it this way. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Now to stitch the remaining 5 signatures. It's a very slow, methodical process, and it's a lot of fun to see that book come together as you're working. It's exciting when you get to the last signature because the book is almost done, but go slowly so that you make sure that everything is consistent, everything is equally taut to make sure that all the threads are just so. I'm super excited with how these books turned out. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.